The ATACMS and Storm Shadows in particular, they are the weapon of choice to bring us closer to nuclear conflict with Russia. So what does it mean for these weapons to strike into Russia? And what does it change other than this risk of nuclear conflict that you've been outlining?
Other than the risk of nuclear war.
Yeah, other than that, right? Does it change anything else? Is that it?
Nuclear war. Other than that, what does it, look, Vladimir Putin on September 12th, I believe, gave a statement about, at that time, the discussion of giving Ukraine permission to use ATACMS missiles and Storm Shadow missiles. And he said that Russia knows that you can't use either the ATACMS or the Storm Shadow or the French Scalp, for instance. Ukraine can't do it without the assistance of the United States and Great Britain in creating the targeting data and the navigation data, basically enabling the missile to hit its target. Ukrainians can't do it. The US and the British have to do it, have to have hands on. And therefore, from the Russian perspective, any use of these missiles against Russian territory would constitute an attack not by Ukraine against Russia, but if the ATACMS was used by the United States against Russia, if Storm Shadow by the British against Russia. Well, 6 ATACMS were launched the other day against targets in Bryansk, I believe, and a number of Storm Shadows were launched yesterday against targets in the Kursk region, and they targeted a command and control center. According to Russian media, these did strike a Russian command and control center, and there were casualties. The Russians took casualties. The Russians claim that the command and control center is still functioning, but Great Britain attacked a Russian military facility and killed Russian soldiers. And I believe the Russians are now going to be pursuing criminal charges against the British, murder, because Britain's supposedly not in a state of war. So this is a criminal action. There's no legal justification for what the British did. And the Russians are going to find out the names of the British people involved, and they will prosecute them for murder, because that's what it is. But moreover, it's an attack against Russia. And I believe that it was the Storm Shadow attack more than anything else that led to the Russian decision to retaliate. And so the question is, what will Ukraine do? They're on notice. Do it again, and Russia's going to hit you again. I mean, it's simple as that. Do it again, and Russia will hit you again. Russia has said that it will notify Ukraine to spare the lives of Ukrainian civilians. This is something that I had an interesting discussion with my wife about, because I said, the Russians are very legalistic, and I can't imagine them striking an urban area. Because remember, the target they hit this morning was a factory that was actively building short and intermediate range missiles, together with the assistance of the United States and Great Britain, that were designed to strike Russia. So there's no question about why they hit this and the legitimacy of this. But let's say the Russians decide next time to take out Bankova Street, where the government of Ukraine is in Kiev. These are legitimate command and control targets, but there is a good chance of collateral damage amongst civilian populations. And I told my wife, I don't see the Russians doing this without announcing it in advance. She's like, oh no, they can't announce in advance because then Zelensky won't be there. And I said, well, maybe the point isn't to kill Zelensky, but to destroy the infrastructure of government. And I said, I can't see them doing it without announcing it. And Putin came out and said, no, we're going to announce it, because this is what Russia does. This is what the West doesn't understand. Russia actually complies with international law. Their mistakes are made. Sure, there's, bad apples and all that. But overall, the Russian approach towards this Ukraine conflict has been in compliance with international law from the very beginning, when they articulated a case under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter of preemptive collective self-defense. That is an articulable argument. There's people who can disagree with it, but you can't say that the Russians are operating outside the framework of international law. They spelled out exactly what they're doing, and it actually models the NATO behavior in Kosovo in 1999, the same arguments. So it's sort of ironic to have NATO members going, that's an illegitimate argument. Well, it's the one you made to go into Kosovo. But the bottom line is Russia, I think the next target will be Kiev. and it will be devastating against Bankova Street. But the Russians will announce it in advance and give the Ukrainian civilians a chance to evacuate. But let there be no doubt that once Russia says they're taking it out, it's gone. And let there be no doubt that if Ukraine uses Storm Shadow missiles against Russia, Bankova Street is probably gone, finished. And then where do we go from there? Does the West want to continue to escalate? I think the Russians will do this as long as the West wants to do this. But if the West, does anything other than facilitating Ukrainian attack, if the West gets involved itself without Ukrainian fingers, then Russia is prepared to strike in Europe, NATO, and other European targets. With this missile or with other missiles, remember, they still have, the RS-26. If Putin did in fact put it into production this past summer, they should have a certain quantity of those available as well. So there's not a place in Europe that's safe right now, and you can thank Joe Biden.